Welcome to Motivated to Lead podcast, helping you become a better leader. I'm your host, Mark Klingsheim. Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining us for our podcast this week. My name is Mark Klingsheim with SEMA Partners. Each week, we interview leaders and they share lessons learned from their careers. Our goal is to help you become a better leader. If you're new to this podcast, please go back and listen to some of our previous guests, and please subscribe, and also let others know if you're enjoying our conversations. This week, we're happy to have joining us Dr. Jeff Holmes. Jeff has been an executive coach. He's held leadership positions. He's coached for over 30 years and helped people progress in their careers into high-level leadership positions. We're going to be talking about the topic of character development. I think it's a subject that isn't talked about a lot, but he's got some great thoughts to share around that and other leadership lessons he's learned in his career. Looking forward to today's conversation with Jeff. It's great to have Jeff joining us for our conversation today. Thanks, Jeff, for taking some time out of your schedule to talk.
Really excited to be here. Thank you so much, Mark. What a blessing.
Yeah, well, looking forward to the conversation. I guess, first off, can you give our listeners just a little bit of an overview of your career and a little bit of your career story?
I've been thinking about this question for so long. I've been driving at real transformation and change for my entire life, pretty much since high school. Once I graduated high school, went into college and got passionate about how to bring real life change and transformation in people. I've been a part of leading nonprofits and then founding nonprofits for the bulk of my career. Working with underprivileged, working with the poor in other countries. So that's been my, let's start it, let's do something, let's see if we can bring real life change, both internally and externally. Been leading in churches, been leading in nonprofit organizations throughout those years. So that's the thumbnail.
And you're joining us from California. You're up in the Bay Area, and I'm glad we're not talking in January or February, so you can't rub it in.
Yeah, that's really true. Yeah, we moved up from San Diego. I've been a California boy most of my life, and we moved up from San Diego about 13 years ago now, and been working with leaders in Silicon Valley for the last several of those as a executive leadership coach. So made a shift and transition into coaching and while doing the other nonprofits. So it's been a busy and fun journey.
Yeah. Well, I love this question. Love to hear the responses from people that I asked this question of. If you were able to spin back time and talk to 22-year-old Jeff with what you know now, what advice would you give him?
Oh, man. I would say, and it's my current soapbox, beware of this dirty word. And it's a surprising dirty word. It's loyalty. Beware of loyalty. I was early on eager to express and give my loyalty in all of the organizations I served in. And then as I became a leader, I elevated loyalty as a demand. It even made it on one of our mission, vision, core values sheets that loyalty was one of our core values. And about 3 years ago, I began to run into major issues around loyalty and studied it from a philosophical realm, from a theological realm, and came to this startling conclusion. Loyalty is actually founded in fear. And anything founded in fear is not a good thing. When I was giving my loyalty to the organizations I was giving my loyalty to, it was because I was afraid of being an outsider or afraid of not being fully embraced. And when I was demanding loyalty as an organization, it was because I was afraid people were going to abandon the organization. And fear is just not a great motivator. And as I did my work, both philosophically and theologically, I came to the realization that the opposite, it's really not an opposite word, it's more of a complementary word, is faithfulness. And the word I should be focused on is faithfulness. I should work to be faithful to the organizations with their best interest at heart from my perspective, as opposed to what they dictate to me as their best interest. Faithfulness is driven by love. It's driven by empathy. It's driven by compassion. Loyalty is driven by fear. And so that my statement to me, my 23-year-old me, would be, don't quickly give your loyalty. Look for ways to give faithfulness. Don't operate in your world out of fear.
Is there any advice that you received early on that, looking back on, you should have ignored?
I think it's a subtle, it really didn't come as advice. It came as tribal information that was overlaid on me. And I'll explain it this way. It's connected to the loyalty in a bit, or in some ways. I would look at a group and say, hey, this group of folks doing work with poverty in northern Mexico, this is how they talk, this is the language they use. And I would adopt the language, I would adopt the behaviors, I would adopt the metrics. I'm working with leaders now who live in that. And that tribal overlay kind of went without question. It just was the way everybody talked, walked, and quacked. And I just took it on. So it really wasn't, they didn't say, hey, do this, but subtly they said, hey, do this. And so I just, okay, this is what you do to be in the nonprofit world. This is what you do to be in the tech world. This is what you do when you're a CEO or C-level leader. And so just do it, and I should have been more evaluative, and I don't know if it's a word, but scrutinous. Is that a word? I don't know. We'll look it up later. But I should have dealt with it with a lot more scrutiny.
Okay. So you're working with executives now and coaching them. If you think about any patterns that you've seen as far as of new leaders or people that have maybe moved into a new position, any patterns you see of mistakes that leaders are making?
Yeah, I do. Yes, very, very much so. I think there's two, I guess they're 30,000 foot. And if you're a new leader and you're listening to this, you might say that's not super helpful. But I think after some real looking, you'd find that it is helpful. One is the assumption that because you were managed, you know how to manage. You're putting on a totally different hat. So it doesn't matter how great your manager was, how poorly your manager was, how great your leader was, how poor your leader was. None of that really matters, because once you step into the role, it's a whole new skill set. And the mistake they make is that they've cherry picked the things that they didn't like in previous leaders and managers and said, I'm not going to be that. And then they've picked the things that they want to be, and I'm going to be that. And it tends to be goalposts that are unachievable, because the skills of the seat that they're sitting in need to be developed in order to address the things they don't want to be and the things they want to be. So the mistake is stopping and pausing and developing some skills as they step into the new role. I'll just leave it there. I think that's enough to think on.
The area of character development, and it's an area that has probably not been talked about as much as there's a lot of, it seems like in the business world, that there's certain things that people talk a lot about, culture being one, and a number of other things. But talk a little bit about that character development, and as an executive or leader, what do you talk about around that subject?
This is one of my heartbeat issues, thoughts. It's at the core of the work that I'm doing. So I read Jim Collins' book, Good to Great. And in Good to Great, he talks about, great companies have level 5 leaders. What's a level 5 leader, Jim? A level 5 leader is a leader with humility. And I think I read that. I mean, when did that book come out? 20 years ago, 25 years ago? I read it right when it came out. I was the first in line because I was a fanboy. And the crisis came to me. Okay, I want to be a humble leader. How do I do that? How how do you become humble? What is that? And then the more I've been working with folks in their leadership, I do the DISC assessment with most of my leaders, and a lot of the C-suite folks are high D's, they're drivers, get it done. And every time I debrief an assessment with them, I say, so out of this assessment, what do you need to work on? And they say, patience. I need more patience. Okay, well, how do you do that? How do you actually functionally develop humility, patience, courage, kindness, gentleness? What are the mechanisms that are there? And that spun me into a journey early on. That was my doctoral work, was identity development. And then more recently, as I've done some work through Adam Grant's work and Danny Kahneman's work, as well as Shazad Shamin's positive intelligence stuff, I've come to crystallize the issue. There's two real issues around character development. One is the stories we tell, and the other is how we assess the real world testing and consequence of the character we live out. Those two things are at play. I'll illustrate the first one. The first one, I have a crystal clear image of about 8 weeks ago. I was training for a bike race. I'm a cyclist, and I'm out. And in order to train, you've got to do these repeats where essentially you're interval really hard and then you take a break. And we have great roads here, and I'm out on this back road right along a reservoir. Water's there, sunshine's out. And the unwritten rule in cycling is, if you see a cyclist on the side of the road, you slow down and offer help. Well, I'm in the middle of an interval. I'm going as hard and as fast as I can. And sure enough, I see this guy on the side of the road. And I play this game. I pretend not to see him until I'm right on top of him. And then I yell out, "You okay?" And don't even pause to hear his response, so that I have fulfilled my responsibility to be someone who cares for people on the side of the road. Right. The story I was telling myself was, I'm an athlete. I've got this objective that I need to accomplish. That objective means I don't have time for any distractions. And so as the hero of my story, I'm going to conquer the distractions to get to the winning finish line, the heroic conclusion. That's the story. Well, I finished the thing or the interval and said, "Oh my gosh, I felt horrible." That's not who I want to be.
Sure.
So as I am riding, literally another mile up the road is another cyclist, and I'm about to start another interval. And the question comes to me, what story do you want to tell about yourself? Are you the athlete? Or are you going to be the Good Samaritan? Which one? I had a choice between the story I was going to tell. And I decided I want to tell a story about being a Good Samaritan. So I stopped, found out the guy had never changed a tire before. He was going to be stuck there for hours. Gave him a 20-minute tire change lesson, got on my bike, finished my ride. And the story was the thing that was determining the expression of my character. And I think when leaders say, I've got to develop patience, what's the story you're telling yourself that makes you impatient? What's behind that? I know in my impatience, it's been, if this doesn't get done, then, and I'm the hero, I'm the only one that can get this done. And that's what's generating the impatience. And when leaders start to look at the stories they're telling themselves, it begins to give them a lens into how they'll show up and how they want to show up. It gives them, lens is not the right word, it gives them the moment of choice. They can choose now what story they're going to use to create their character.
So I was talking to an executive this morning. We're going through an assessment that we use in our search practice. And one of the parts of it is you've got an area of strength or motivation in your life, which used properly is incredible, but there's always the shadow side of that, and the awareness of that, and again, what story are you telling yourself about kind of what you're doing is so important. And that awareness, it's not that all of us have areas that we have to develop and grow, and but not realizing it can leave a wake of disaster behind us. We think we're accomplishing something, but we leave a lot of stuff that other people have to deal with. Talk a little bit about that as far as the ability to be self-aware. And there's a lot written on emotional intelligence and the importance of that for executives. How can people grow in that area?
Oh man. Well, I think there's, how can people grow in that area? They need people like you in their lives, Mark, honestly, who will ask those questions about how are your strengths, and how are your strengths showing up as weaknesses, and creating a safe place to explore those things. One of the realities as a leader that I came to, it was early on, and I struggled with it through my all of my leadership, was how lonely it was. And the loneliness wasn't, early on, I thought it was around, the loneliness was around being the decision maker. That really wasn't the loneliness. I don't mind I like being the decision maker, honestly. That's great. Put me in the driver's seat. So that wasn't the loneliness. And the loneliness wasn't around having people understand the decisions I was making. I knew that was a part of team building, and there was discretion, all that. I thought that might be it. But where I realized the loneliness exists is having a safe, non-biased thought partner who works with you to explore your strengths and your weaknesses. That is critical. I didn't get to that point until too late in my career, where I had somebody walking with me and saying, hey, you come up with great ideas. And do you realize that you're spinning your people out? How are you, and he wasn't being spun out by my great ideas. He wasn't bitter. He wasn't angry. He was just an objective third party. That was huge. That piece is huge. I think even if you don't have someone like that in your life, taking time to ask the question, where are my strengths, weaknesses, and where am I leveraging my strengths in my world? That reflective time is a huge part of resilience. And then I think the other is to develop the awareness of, this goes back to character, of the stories that you're telling yourself and how they're actually driving you. So in that reflection time, figuring that out.
I know another topic that you talk about is around the topic of resilience and the importance of that. And I think, you look at the leaders that have led well for decades, and I've seen this in executives, is the ability to bounce back after disappointment or failure. And talk a little bit about that, some of the lessons that you've learned around that topic.
The greatest lesson came from my undergraduate psychology class on crisis intervention. And I didn't want to take the class. I ended up never pursuing the psychology stuff, but that was the first time I got introduced to the stages of grief. And there's some say there's 7, there can be 4, some say they're 5, but the stages of grief are denial, as I understand them: denial, bargaining, depression, and resolution. And those stages are so important to walk through when we experience difficult change. I was in college in the 80s. So that material was particularly directed to people who'd lost a loved one. And it hadn't at that point been extrapolated out through the work of the leaders in positive psychology into other loss. But really what undermines resilience is not dealing with loss. not actually walking through stages of grief. And so many leaders burn out because they only step into the first step in grieving, which is denial. And they just deny it and drive on, push on. And it may make them resilient for the short term, but in the long term, it doesn't. And the stepping then to through that bargaining, realizing you're trying to fix, solve, and that is a stage, but you can't fix it and solve it. And then next, to be sad about it. This is a hard change. Staff transition is a perfect example of this. Most leaders crumble over time with when they have healthy, beloved staff that transition to their next great thing. They're going to, right? They have to. That's the whole purpose. They can't be with you. They're not your wife, or husband, but they're not married to you. They're not going to till death do you part. So you will experience the grief of loss of a partner in your business. And will you walk through the stages of grief and feel it? So that's a huge part of resilience. And I think being empathetic and emotionally aware to yourself is the part where, but most of us get it done leaders are externally working toward empathy and externally working toward exercising compassion, but we rarely turn those eyes inward and give ourselves the space to say, this makes me, I'm really sad about this. And that if we don't do that work, it will not help us in the long run.
Right. Yeah, that's a great thought. I don't think anybody that we've had on has talked about that aspect of that. And so as you continue to grow and develop, as you help other leaders and coach, and what are some books that you've put on other leaders' lists and said you should read this, and you think it would be helpful for our listeners?
Oh man, well, my first thought in this, I have a long, fun list that I want to qualify every single book. But my first thought in this was read significant works for fun. The move that we're in right now culturally is a move toward empathy and emotional intelligence and awareness and building culture. Those are at the core human emotional issues. We're no longer in the clockmaker world where if I could just install the right operating system, then everything will be honky-dory. So significant works. I'm a fan of Russian novelists. So I go back to Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment about once every 5 years. This is about all I can handle because it's a pretty depressive book. But it pushes me down to understand the grief and suffering and struggle. And business books don't do that, right? It's hey, this is how you make everything just work perfect. So read for fun, but read significant stuff for fun is what I would say, and glean the emotional reality of what's going on. So that's the first in general. I'm a big Lord of the Rings fan, Russian novelist fan, pick any of those. The current book I'm delighted in is Reed Hastings' No Rules Rules. And here's why I love it. It is a book about generously delivering dignity to the people you lead. I don't think he realized that was what he was doing. I mean, you can hear the undertones of it, and it's kind of like, here's how Netflix operates. And so he does a lot about, hey, no vacation policy, and hey, a lot of elimination of that stuff. But at the core, the golden thread through the book is a passion to provide dignity to the people that you work with. And I think at the end of the day, all of us, we don't want to be remembered for the widget we produced. We want to be remembered for the impact we had on people. And what do people remember? They remember how we made them feel. They don't remember what we said. They don't remember what we did. They remember how we made them feel. And so driving toward dignity is so cool. And then the way he brings together, here's how this incredible company has done what it's done. And at the heart of it, to talk about bringing dignity to people, it's pretty powerful. I like it with that lens on. I don't recommend it as a do all of the things in there, because you'll probably get fired from your board. So I love that. I got one other I'd recommend with a caveat too. So many of my leaders are realizing the value of coaching their staff, their employees, and the folks they're working with. And there's a great little book called The Coaching Habit, which gives 7 golden questions that you can leverage. And I like giving this to my leaders because they're busy, and it's like, just give me a formula and I want to plug it in. So it's been really helpful for a lot of my leaders. And I give this caveat to it. All 7 questions have to be driven by honest curiosity, not by your agenda. Because so often, I mean, our employees are smart. We hired them because they're smart. So why do we think we could come in and ask a leading question and them not think to themselves, he's asking me another leading question, I've got to give the right answer, right? They know. So if you're honestly curious and you've hired good people, it really pays dividends, and these questions will pay huge dividends. So
what's the name of that author?
Michael Bungay Stainer. I'm pretty sure that's how you pronounce his name. Great. We're not personal friends.
Okay, super. So outside of work, what do you like to do to recharge? And I think I know one thing you do, we've already talked about, but
yeah, cycling for sure. And then we are blessed to have a little bit of property. And one of the things I realized is so important for me to recharge are discrete, completable projects. So often in leadership, it's just not done. The work's never done. And you never get to cross your arms and stand back. And I did that. Look, it's completely done. So about 4 weeks ago, I told my wife, I need another project. I know it's going to be expensive, but I need to build a deck. So we went out and got all the stuff and built a deck. So every 3 months or so, I need some big project. It restores my soul. And then Hawaii is always there. You can never, sure. I can never get enough Hawaiian vacations.
Yeah. So what parting advice would you give a new or up and coming leader?
A new and up and coming leader, character really matters. And even though you intended to be a person of great character, be intentional. Actually shape your character. I think all of us intend to be people of great character, but very few of us specifically call out, I'm going to shape my character and build my patience. I'm going to shape my empathy and build my empathy. We all just say, gosh, I need to be more patient, and then feel guilty when we're not. And so get going on that, and get some partners who want to work on the same thing with you and engage in developing your character.
Great. So thanks so much for sharing your thoughts. And I know this is going to be helpful for our listeners. How would somebody learn more about what your work and what you're working on these days?
I love that. You can definitely follow me on LinkedIn. I post in pretty regularly on LinkedIn, and then you can go to my website, jeffkholmes.com, and there's info there, and you can get in touch with me there. And there's also stuff out there on YouTube. If you search me, you can find me at the YouTube spheres as well. So, but LinkedIn's my main push. That's where I push out most of my content these days.
Okay. Well, great. Well, thanks again. And I wish you continued success in all that you're doing. And it was great to connect today.
What a great time. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Motivated to Lead podcast. Please subscribe on iTunes. You can also see a video version of this interview at motivatedtolead.com. This podcast is brought to you by SEMA Partners, helping you find your next great leader.